Hello folks, and thank you for joining me. Today's video, I want to talk about the illegal immigration, and not only to where I live, the United States, but also to all the other Western nations combined, Western and developed nations, particularly from the third world nations to the developed world. The notion and the trend of illegal immigration, the non-stop continuous streaming of people. And yeah, let's start chatting about that. Recently, we had United Nations meeting in New York City. I think it was about a week or 10 days ago. And Trump was given a speech. And I remember hearing what he was saying. His statement was extremely interesting. He was touch basing to the illegal immigration, not only again for the United States, but for the whole Western Europe or the whole Europe. And he used a specific term that made me think that it was a rather interesting statement. He said the immigration experience or the immigration experiment, or more like this experiment, has failed and failed miserably. This is what he clearly stated. This was extremely, I believe, a loaded statement with a lot of analyses that can be done about it. The experiment, the terminology that he was using was this. And this is exactly, it's going to make the gist of my video, my video recording for this one. The reason why I believe that Trump was calling this as experiment was this. As we all know, the number one factor that brought Donald Trump to his second term presidency was illegal immigration. And the number one topic on his agenda since he started working as a president second term has been the illegal immigration, and will be until for the remainder part of his term, 3 more years, in other words, or 3+ more years. So it is by all means one of the most defining events or problems of our current times. In about 3 months, we're going to be finishing the first quarter of the year 2025. And the main defining issue, and of course I know there are lots of others, but the primarily defining issue for all developed nations is the influx of the the non-stop stream from the third world nations into the developed nations. In short, it is popularly called as illegal immigration. Obviously, in the United States, Trump administration has been taking all kinds of measures to basically fix the problem, huge problem, that was created and facilitated and organized by the previous administration, Biden administration. And that's not what I'll be talking about. It's not going to be about politics. It's not going to be about Trump versus Biden, Republicans versus Democrats. All the known issues that none of them is that I plan to cover on this topic. I want to basically talk about that. You remember that experiment that he referred to? This is the part I want to talk about. So I will give a few examples from several nations, not only from the United States but also from Western Europe. And I want to start with Germany. Germany, by the year 2015, when Merkel was Chancellor or equivalent of Prime Minister of Germany, she made a decision. And the decision was to open the borders to pretty much anyone. And that year, Germany accepted, and starting that year, In a matter of relatively short period of time, if you compare it with the previous decades, over a million people came to Germany, a lot of them from like Syria or Afghanistan and countries like that. There was an idea behind that. It wasn't haphazard. It wasn't only just a kind of a recent situations in those places in the Middle East and kind of a unplanned, just kind of out of pure compassion. Markel was doing this. There was a factor as well. I'm not going to deny that. Compassion was a factor. But, you know, the problem that Germany, 10 years after, if you fast forward today, in 10 years, what they realized was compassion, unless it is balanced with laws and regulations, it is basically unsustainable. The situation that constantly allowing people coming from other countries, and not only other countries, but countries whose cultures are absolutely not comparable and compatible with the host nations, with the cultures of the host nations. And that is the biggest issue, biggest problem. So, up until the year 2015, 2016, and I'll give you a couple of examples, the problems that Germany experienced, they never saw before. Example was, in fact, even before, I think early 2010s, maybe 2011 or 2012, I'm not exactly sure, but in Düsseldorf there was a New Year's Eve. Over 1,200 young women were at various different levels accosted, harassed, groped, and some of them unfortunately raped. And the people who committed these crimes, without a single exception, were all from North Africa and Middle East. This was well known. It was all over in front of people. People, all these 1,200, young women, they saw that, they witnessed that. People around there, it happened to be in this area. It was a large area. It was a New Year celebrations, a huge kind of gathering area. They were witness. And of course, later on, all the police records were indicating that situation. But do you think anything was done? When I'm saying anything was done, literally nothing was done, and it was completely 100% covered up. Not a single person, not a single individual who took part in this crime was caught, arrested, jailed, nothing. They totally acted like this did not even take place. Now I'm going to build up based on this example, and I will share a few more examples, and then I will try to kind of get into the why part of it, like what's going on, and try to kind of share as much as I can do my own personal analysis. Another example I want to give you, this is from more recent times in Germany. A 14-year-old German girl was raped. It was a serial rape because 15 men were involved. They raped this girl, taking turns for 3 hours. Non-stop rape, 3 hours, 15 men. All again from certain countries, as you might imagine. Excuse me. They were all caught. All 15 men were found and arrested, and they had to stand the trial. This is what happened. This is how the trial ended. The judge let them go. She released them. It was a extremely liberal judge, and she let them all go. And the reason, and this is official, according to court records, the reason why that judge released them was this. These 15 people were all immigrants, and they were all going through the immigration frustrations, kind of like a adaptation process. And adaptation is a painful process, and they were going through a lot of frustrations, and they acted upon their deep and intense frustrations, and she let them all, every single one of them, go. The immediate question that comes to my mind is, if this 14-year-old German girl was her daughter, would she show the same tolerance, the same level of tolerance, the same level of leniency, calmly as she said, due to immigration frustrations? Would she done that? If she would not, what kind of consciousness would put this judge in a place that it's okay, I can let them go, and they can be still continue to be frustrated and rape other girls, but that's fine. This is the price that my society, my people, will pay to be able to facilitate these people's adaptation processes into the Western developed world. This is the core part of experiment that Trump was referring to during his speech, when he was delivering his speech in the most recent United Nations meeting in New York City. The idea behind opening the doors, like opening the floodgates and letting all these people from those countries whose cultures are 100% extremely incompatible with the host nation's countries, would it be that difficult to at least think that these kinds of problems would occur, and would occur to a great extent, to the extent that actually it would be unacceptable, totally and absolutely unacceptable? But I guess for some reason, those experts, when they were making these decisions, failed to foresee this. Today, if you go to Paris, which is the city of supposedly romance and fashion, one of the bastions of the Western civilization, Paris. Say hot summer day, young girls are walking in miniskirts. No more. They're all scared because they're being catcalled, harassed, groped, continuously stared at, and sometimes, unfortunately, be raped. I want to give another example from London. It's been a very well-known problem in London that what they call grooming gangs. I repeat, the grooming gangs. These people are all from Pakistan. They happen to live in the United Kingdom. They actually organized, they built this criminal organization. What they're doing is they're luring these young, underage British girls, white, underage British girls. Somehow they lure them into their circles. They rape them. Maybe they force them. Maybe they somehow giving them drugs. I don't know. They drug them, force them, rape them, whatever, and then they start selling them and making money, generating profit out of their bodies. This is not happening to only a few girls, or a few dozen girls, or a few hundred girls. In London, this problem has happened so far, and it is, as of now, as of this recording, it is still in progress, and so far, thousands of underage British girls fell victim into this criminal organization. What is most shocking is this. This alone itself is extremely shocking, but what is even more shocking, authorities up to the Prime Minister of England, Keir Starmer, He does not acknowledge this problem. He doesn't hear about this problem. He doesn't talk about this problem. He doesn't even accept the existence of this problem. The mayor of London, the city of London, mayor of London, his name is Sadiq Khan. He is himself a Muslim with Pakistani origin. They were trying to basically question him. They were trying to drill him on this question in the parliament. And, you know, to my amazement, they asked these questions back to back. The same question. They were saying the grooming gangs, and they were describing the crime that they were involved with. And of course, Sadiq Khan is well aware of all the details of this problem. But what do you think he was saying? I don't think there is such organization exists. I don't understand what you're saying. I don't understand what grooming gangs are. All kinds of responses that he was given was basically, he was trying to evade the question. He was trying to evade the situation, and he just did not even respond to the questions. And he is a mayor of London. He is responsible with the safety and security of the people living, the residents of London. And they drill him about this problem, and he doesn't even hear it. He doesn't even accept it. So as we talk about now, as of this recording, this problem is continuing. These so far three issues that I just wanted to mention to start kind of describing the dimensions of the situation. So now I'm going to stop here as far as, describing problems. I want to get back to a few decades, like maybe 20, 30 years, actually more, maybe 20, 30 years, and especially last 10 to 15 years, when nations like Sweden, for instance. Sweden is a good example, very good example. Sweden was one of the very successful nations of Europe. As a Scandinavian nation, if you go back about 80 years ago or 100 years ago, Sweden was one of the poorest nations of Europe. And over time, they overcome the difficulties and challenges, and they created almost a miracle nation. 10 million population, and they were hugely successful. And success is not only measured in terms of total, GMP, total production, all these typical economic terms, but especially the social structure that they created. Very just like social structure. Nobody was really standing out. Nobody was extremely rich, but nobody was poor either. Everybody was taking their own fair share from the wealth of the nation, and everybody was abiding the law, and it was written in the Swedes' genes to abide the law and not to break the law, and work hard. Beautiful nation, beautiful people. And as far as I think as late as 1980s or maybe early 90s, Sweden decided to help. Again, the same thing we're coming back to, out of compassion. They decided to help the people of countries and nations that are war-torn, civil wars, all kinds of problems, poverty and all those. And there's no shortage of it, and especially in the Middle East. And they opened their doors to people from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Jordan, from Libya, from Morocco, all those nations. The newcomers, especially initial 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years, actually were very positive. They were a good example. The volume of the immigration, though, was very well controlled. Because again, we're talking about 10 million people. This is not a huge country. And they were basically allowing a relatively small percentage of the people from those countries, and to give them a chance to find opportunities in the Western world, and eventually to share the values of the Western world, to become part of the Western world. This was the idea when Trump was saying experiment. The idea was, if you take people from these backward countries, war-torn nations, out of extreme poverty and all that, if you bring them into the developed and wealthy Western nations midst and let them live there, eventually they will be like the rest of the people. They will start enjoying the benefits and opportunities, and they will come to believe and share the same value system, same values, and the same shared experiences, and they will become eventually just like the rest of the people of those host nations. They were going to become Western people. This just did not happen, has not happened, and all indicators are showing that it is impossible that it's going to happen. But why is it that the initial experiment was more successful? I said because it was controlled, and there was a lot less people. So people, the first comers, were fully aware of the fact that they were given a chance. They had a privilege to be invited to Sweden or England for same reason. Germany, Holland, France, they had the privilege of being invited into those nations and given opportunities to live there and work there and to build their lives. And they were actually hardworking people. They were a lot better. They were really trying to assimilate and become the part of that nation, culture-wise and everything. But the problem started with opening the floodgates. And the second time, I call this, the phase 2. Phase 1 was more controlled fashion, and they were bringing people in. The phase 2 was they just opened the floodgates. This is my analogy. And a whole lot more people they started letting in. Millions of people. The initial numbers were only 2% of the Swedish society. Those were the people that were initially brought from those countries. But eventually, as of now, their percentage, their share is exceeding 20% in this Swedish population. So Sweden is a good example because of that, because it's kind of almost like a laboratory setting. It's a small nation, 10 million people. This is how it was, and this is what happened. What they're seeing now today, what Swedish government is doing today is this. First off, they came to realize painfully that the compassion that they were shown by bringing that many people didn't do anything for anybody. In fact, it hurt everybody. And those who are hurt most are the actual Swedish citizens. And these people, forget about, assimilating into the Western Swedish culture. They actually completely and explicitly rejected the Swedish culture and the language, and they started building their own enclaves within large metropolitan areas such as Stockholm. And these areas now are comparable to, like in the United States, for instance, in Chicago, gang-controlled areas. That's the good comparison. This is how they are now. And today, Sweden is the capital of a gun-related crimes. And almost all, in fact, I don't even feel like using the word almost, all this crime is committed by these people. So this experiment has failed, and failed miserably. And the consequences of this failure are completely borne by the Swedish people. Because the people who came from those nations, whose cultures are 100% incompatible with the Western values, in this case, Swedish values, they just could not adapt themselves into their host culture. Forget about it. They totally and entirely reject the idea of assimilation. I want to give you another example again from Germany. And this is also another recent situation. I was watching in amazement this video. I was watching in amazement. This guy, he was, I think, from Afghanistan. He was walking in Germany. He was walking in park. And in this area, there was this German woman. She was jogging, working out in the park. She was just running, jogging. Somehow he stopped her, and he started talking to her. They were speaking in German. There was closed captions in English, so I was able to understand what they were saying. The guy was saying this: "Look, lady, I want to have a relationship with you, a sexual relationship with you." Basically, he's saying, "I want to have sex with you." And the woman was totally, you can imagine, shocked and surprised, and obviously fearful and everything. But she was still kind of controlling herself, and she was trying to respond to this guy. And she was saying, "Look, this is not how it goes. If you want to have a relationship with a woman, there are different ways. There's got to be consent before a man and woman can have sex." She was trying to explain those things to him. Consent. This is the word in English writing. Obviously, she used in German the equivalent of the word, the concept of consent. He was not understanding it. He was not getting it, the concept of consent. That means man has to have the consent of the woman to have sex with her. He wasn't getting it. Because in his culture, there is no such thing. And I remember his face, there was some kind of a stain here in the middle of his forehead, right here. That stain, the person who was actually presenting that explained the reason why there was a stain. Because he was a pious Muslim, and he was praying 5 times a day. And for those who are extremely pious Muslims, who praying 5 times a day, when they're praying so many times, each time they're praying, they're putting their heads down, so it creates a stain. So he was a pious Muslim. And he was literally talking to this woman and saying, "Look, lady, I have needs. Why don't you have sex with me?" This is how he was approaching. So now, this example that I was just trying to give you is the reason why I'm giving that example is not only try to kind of make it more dramatic or anything, but actually trying to emphasize on the concept of cultural incompatibility. Not a single Western man, not a single one, even the rapist. I mean, what does rapists do? He plans, he knows that no woman will be willingly go without any kind of resistance, so they basically resort to first violence and then rape, right? No, not a single Western man would approach to a woman this way. Because every Western man knows, or anyone who lives by Western values, who believe in Western values, who share those values, who grew up with those values, regardless of where they're from, they understand that this is how it works, right? But not this guy from Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, in Syria, and Jordan, and Libya, and Egypt, and Morocco, all these places are full of those kinds of men. Millions, tens of millions upon them. Tens of millions upon tens of millions are thinking like that. The way they see women, the woman is not a human being. The woman is a piece of meat. The woman must be at our disposal. Anytime we like to have sex with a woman, we should be able to do that. This is the way they see and approach women. And this is one of the typical incompatibilities, which is causing, you remember I mentioned the situation in Germany. It was like early 2010s, I said, I think it was in Düsseldorf, 1,200 women were harassed, raped, to various degrees. Some of them were fully raped, some just harassed, accosted, grabbed, whatever. Or in Sweden, in Holland, in France, the rate of rape basically skyrocketed. And those who are committing those crimes, perpetrators, are without any single exception from these groups of people. So this experiment, as Trump said in his speech, failed. I haven't even touched base the economic aspects of it, the amount of debt weight that they create, because the system is trying to help them financially. They're trying to take care of them. They're giving them housing. They're trying to feed them. They're trying to educate them. Their health care and all those things. And it's all basically financed by the taxpayers, right? And I didn't even touch base that. I started with the safety and security aspect of the host nations and what happened over the period of 15 to 20 years with this uncontrolled immigration from the third world nations, and what's happening today. And this must be clearly understood and dealt with. But again, the bigger problem is, like I said, like in London, they decided knowingly and willingly, the politicians and the system, those who are responsible, who are in control of the system, they decided to ignore this problem because they know that their voting base is going to be hurt if they start taking action. Today, in London, majority of people are like these people. And they force the British government to officially establish the Sharia law in the British judicial legal code. This is not a joke. This may be an unbelievable statement. I'm not, in fact, I have a hard time to believe that I'm saying this, and I'm not just BSing or lying. But unfortunately, it's not the case. Unfortunately, I'm very, very sincere. In current time, in England, I repeat, the Muslim people are forcing the British government to bring the law of Islam, the Sharia, into their legal penal code or penal system. And this is not only taking place in England, the similar situation in France and in Holland. That's why when you look at Europe today, the general political profile, which has been for decades in the kind of a center or more like a social democrat side, and it has been like this for decades. I mean, since World War II, it has been like this, right? It's been like 75 years, right? Since 80 years. It's been 80 years since World War II, and the first 70 years or so has been like the social democrat, sent middle of the way. It has been the political system all across Europe, the entire European Union. While today pendulum basically swing all the way to right. That's not a coincidence. That's not because of racism. The reason why authorities, the police authorities, politicians, and those who are responsible at high levels of those institutions who are responsible with these situations cannot take any action. Just like an example I gave you, the judge let those 15 men who raped the 14-year-old German girl, go free. They just went home scot-free, no problem, because they're scared. Nobody wants to be labeled as racist. This is the problem. Nobody wants to be given a hard time or having risking their careers as a judge, maybe, or as a police officer, or whatever the position in politics. They don't want to risk their political or professional careers, and they don't want to be labeled as racist, because the slightest thing that they think they do, for instance, hey, if this judge, for instance, instead of letting them go, say, she gave them, I don't know, 20 years behind the bars, she would be probably destroyed. Her career as a judge in the legal system probably would have been destroyed. So nobody wants to take personal responsibility. Nobody is taking any action. Since this is so widespread, the system is basically frozen, and they're locked. They can't do anything unless some big change comes from the top and says enough is enough, and we're not gonna care about any more of this being scared of labeled as racist if we do the right thing. Because the action, this is already high time. It's already passing the high time to take the action to deal with this problem and stop the bleeding. It's already too late. Like the example I gave you, in London, thousands of young minor English girls fell victim and their lives have been destroyed. I want to give you one more example, in fact, as I'm saying that. Again in Germany, a German girl was raped. His rapist again, I don't have to say that, whatever, one of those places. And she was fighting, physically fighting. And she had the, courage to take it to the legal system, because so many of them were not even going to court or calling the police and filing a police report, because they just didn't believe in the system. They didn't believe the police could do anything, or maybe they were scared. This girl did. She called the police, and eventually her case was in front of the judge. And guess what? Judge put her, I repeat, judge put her in jail. Her crime was, while she was being raped, she yelled at her rapist derogatory words. And because of that, that was interpreted as racist statement, and then she was jailed. Now just let that sink in. Let that sink in. Just think about that. If you have a sister, if you have a wife, if you have a daughter, think about that. That she is resisting the rape as much as she could possibly do with her own physical capabilities. And out of frustration, she's yelling and screaming, and she's calling her rapist, which is very, very normal, extremely normal thing in that kind of situation. And she's saying that in the court, or somehow it was gathered as information. I don't know the details. And the judge is putting this young girl in jail because of this. They deem this as a crime. Her rapist, on the other hand, goes home scot-free. If social justice, this is anymore is not compassion. This is anymore is not social justice. But this is something else. I don't know how to define it and describe it. What I know is this. It is absolutely not sustainable. And if it keeps going like this, this will be the end of the Western civilization and end of Europe. That's what Trump is fully aware. This particular problem I've been trying to describe here. And that's why he was telling the European nations leaders in the United Nations meeting in New York City, as the immigration experimentation has failed and failed miserably, and you are all responsible with destroying the great Western civilization. This is what he was saying. And again, behind that, as much as there is a compassion part of the component, of course, there is another component, which is an economic component. That all of these nations, the developed, economically and technologically developed, rich Western nations, They have all one common problem. It's a population problem. The birth rate is well below the replacement rate. The replacement rate for any society in the world is calculated and estimated as 2.1%, meaning if the society does not maintain 2.1% of the birth rate, that means it is not capable anymore of replacing itself. That means over time, over 10, 20, 30, 40 years, their population is going to go down and go down drastically. The population mathematics deals with these problems, and it calculates things given all the factors and components, and give them weights and stuff, and they calculate, they model them. Given their birth rates and everything, they can estimate what's going to happen to, for instance, German population, English population, French population, next 30, 40, 50 years. And they're consistently, every year, their birth rate is about 1.6, 1.4, 1.2 levels. That is including the given immigration. Meaning, if you take out the current immigration, it's even a lot less. It's practically, if they keep going at this rate, I don't know, 7, 8 years from now, maybe there won't be any Italian population, something like that. In fact, they say those things about Italy. The real the growth rate, the real population growth rate, the net number of people dying, number of people born, and everything, the net is almost actually in Italy. If you take the immigration factor out, it's extremely low, measured by 0 point something. I don't know the exact number, but I know one thing: it's way below, way below. I mean, it's an alarmingly low rate. So excuse me. Given these factors, these countries need people to work. That is an economic fact. And they're resorting to bring in people from other countries who are not as fortunate as these nations are economically. That makes sense, but unless it is balanced with the problems that I just described, well, there's going to be another huge problem. The world history, the history of civilization, saw these problems. If you go back to times of the Sumerians, thousands of years ago, Sumerians built, incredible civilization. They were the most civilized nation that time in Mesopotamia. The Sumerian nation, where Sumerians were, right, in today's Turkey. And then they started accepting foreign people called Akkadians. Akkadians, over time, not immediately, but over time, their population went up, and proportionally they became the level that they would dominate the Sumerian population, which they did. Sumerian civilization collapsed. That's what happened. Similar situation happened to Roman Empire. Romans also, for similar economic dynamics and reasons, and they were accepting lots of foreigners. And eventually Western Roman civilization collapsed, and then they moved their center to Eastern Roman, which is called Byzantine. So there was a little bit historical part of it. I just don't want to embellish on that or elaborate on that. So yeah, there's got to be some balance. And today, if those people, especially young people, when they're so excited about being social justice warriors and racism, all those things, they're not thinking about these things. They're just basically shouting what they were taught. Like, they memorize those things like parrots, and they're, without thinking, they're basically shouting those slogans. But this is what's happening. And unless it is checked and balanced, the current trend is not sustainable for the future of the Western civilization. And don't forget that if you bring the third world into the developed world, there will no more developed world, because that will be also a third world. Because the reason why third world is not only because of against popular thinking and colonization or imperialism. There are reasons why third world nations are the way they are. They keep their places the way they created, and that's what they're bringing. If you bring them as uncontrolled, unchecked, non-stop immigration. Thank you very much for sparing time and listening to my video. Have a nice day.